Welcome back to Mr. Orr's Flip Classroom for Grammar. Today we're going to be doing sentence pattern number 2. This deals with elliptical compounds and parallel structure. The essential question is, how can I create compound sentences that eliminate unnecessary or repeated words? This is a really powerful sentence pattern to use, but you have to first understand how to use semicolons, which is why that was pattern 1. And 2, you have to also recognize when you are using words that are essentially the same, and the sentences are the same pattern, the same structure to them. If they're not the same structure, you cannot apply, for example, this particular pattern to your work. If you can, however, at times, it's really effective in reducing your total number of words, and it's an excellent way to create sentence variety, as many of these patterns are. As before, the slides are linked into your notes document. You'll fill in your notes, and then you will go ahead and do the combining of sentences and crafting your own sentences using patterns and the variation of pattern 2. Let's look at the notes. All right, compound sentences with elliptical construction. First of all, what is an elliptical construction? What is an elliptical compound? Well, first of all, think about what the shape of an ellipse is. An ellipse is essentially a stretched circle. So it's not quite round where it comes back to the exact same point in time. It stretches but it does circle back. There is a similarity and a familiarity to it because some of the words and the sequence of those words is repeated in a second sentence. That's why I refer to it as elliptical. But because it's not the same, because you actually shorten it up, because you reduce some of the words, that makes it more elliptical. Okay. And again, it's a compound sentence. So it's going to be two independent clauses or two or more independent clauses combined together into one sentence. That's why elliptical compounds are similar to sentence pattern 1. They're compound sentences combined using semicolons. Pattern 2, however, uses a semicolon to combine related clauses into one sentence. The difference with pattern 2 is that the verb in the second clause is deleted because it's the same verb. You don't have to say the same verb twice if you know how to do this pattern and you replace that verb with a comma. The implication with the comma is that that pause reminds your reader that there was that same verb there before. This pattern can only be applied when both independent clauses are parallel in structure. So let's clarify what that means. Parallel structure implies that all parts of speech are in the same relative location in both clauses, meaning we're not talking about physically where it's located on the page, how many characters over from the margin. But it does mean that you have the same parts of speech in the same order. There's not different amounts of words in either sentence. There has to be the same number of words in both of those independent clauses. For example, and by the way, if you don't know, e.g. stands for, or can be translated as, for example. Subject, verb, direct object. That would be that would be one clause. The second clause would also be subject, verb, direct object. Or, for example, you could have subject, verb, subject, complement, and then subject, verb, subject, complement. The verb in both clauses is identical, meaning it's the same actual verb. It's not is to are, it's is and is. It's was and was. It's walked and walked. It's was thinking and was thinking. So it has to be the exact same. And it has to be repeated in both of those clauses, both of the sentences. Both clauses have to have some kind of complement, something that finishes the thought after that verb. It can be a subject complement, meaning it can be a predicate noun or predicate adjective following a linking verb, or it can be an action verb that has a direct object or indirect object after it. This doesn't work if there's nothing after the verb. This does not work if there's only an adverb after it. So here's the formula. And there's two versions of the formula based on whether or not it's action verb or linking verb because they're completed by different types of words. So if we have an action verb, our formula is subject, action verb, direct object, semicolon, subject, comma, direct object. Because that action verb was originally the same, so we're taking it out and putting a comma in there. It's really important that what you have already doesn't already have a comma in that sentence. The original is I wanted pizza, period. Sydney wanted a wrap, period. Because wanted is the same. Yes, there's an article of, but that doesn't create a significant enough difference to be different, to change this up. If you had an adjective, an adverb, an adjective, if you had some modifiers, descriptive, a prepositional phrase in one and not the other, you wouldn't apply this. But because it's simply wanted in both, I wanted pizza, period becomes the semicolon. Again, we would lowercase this s if it were not part of a proper noun. Subject, subject, wanted, verb becomes comma, and then finish the sentence as it was originally written, a wrap. I wanted pizza, semicolon, Sydney, comma, a wrap, period. That's for action verbs. We use direct or indirect objects. And for the most part, we use direct objects, not indirect objects by themselves. All right, for linking verbs. It's subject, linking verb, subject, complement, which again, subject complement means either predicate noun, which states what the simple subject is, or subject complement can be a predicate adjective, which describes that simple subject directly. Linking verb, it's replaced by the comma in the second clause because it's the same linking verb. Subject complement, period. The original, Jack is a 9th grader, period. Andrew is a 7th grader. Two sentences, we have the same linking verb, same construction, and these two, 9th grader, 7th grader, these two words are similar enough. Jack is a 9th grader when it's combined, period becomes a semicolon. Again, we have a name, so we do not change the capitalization. If it were not a name, we're not a proper noun. What was capitalized in the second sentence would be lowercase second in the combined example. Is the verb, linking verb is replaced with a comma, and then we have the predicate noun, 7th grader. Jack is a 9th grader, semicolon, Jack is a 9th grader, Andrew, comma, a 7th grader. So it's not so much important that you recognize action verbs, linking verbs, direct object versus subject complements. The key is that you're recognizing that these two sentences that you've got, they have the same verb to begin with, and they have the same structure. And if you didn't learn originally when you write them, could you rephrase them so that they are the same verb, same structure, and therefore shorten it up and make your sentences very different than what they'd be if you simply repeated yourself. Some variations. Not as many variations as pattern 2. Variation A, more than the verb can be omitted in the second clause if parallel structure is preserved. So if you have more than just the verb that can be deleted, you want to go ahead and take that out. So in this case, last night is in both sentences. And those are the words that are taken out. So it could be somewhere else in the sentence. It doesn't have to be between the subject and the object or complement. Last night, comma, I watched Survivor, period. Last night, comma, Leo watched Doctor Who. Since last night and watched are repeated, we don't need to say last night twice. That's part of the advantage of putting it in one sentence. Last night, comma, when it's combined, I watched Survivor, semicolon. So the first clause doesn't get changed at all. All it changes is we change the period to a semicolon. In the second clause, we delete all of the repeated words. So the last night, comma, gets deleted. Leo watched, again, the second version of the verb becomes a comma. The complement or object, Doctor Who, period. Again, I don't need you to label or define whether it's what kind of object it is, what kind of complement it is. As long as you know enough about sentences to know when a sentence has them, then that's why you're able to actually replace them with a verb with a comma and use this elliptical structure. There's another pattern to it, variation B. A comma may be used in place of a semicolon if a coordinating conjunction is added, but that's not really that different. We know based on what we did with sentence pattern 1 that pretty much anytime you want to use comma fanboys, you can use a semicolon instead. Last night, comma, I watched Survivor, period. Last night, comma, Leo watched Doctor Who, so it's the same original as our last example. Last night, comma, I watched Survivor, comma, but Leo, comma, Doctor Who. So it's really important that we understand too with this, in order to not make it confusing for our reader by having too many commas, it's important you understand that when you're doing comma fanboys to combine two sentences, the comma is replacing the period with the fanboys. It's not fanboys, comma. The comma comes before the fanboys, not after it. And again, Leo, the comma, watched, the comma replaces the word watched. Last night being in both sentences gets deleted in the second variation. All right, let's take a look at the practice. So again, not as much in terms of the practice, but we're going to go ahead and combine the two sentences. The original Miss Dorothy is crazy, Mrs. Wickenhauser is kind. How can we combine those two sentences? So we've got the name, linking verb, predicate adjective, name, linking verb, predicate adjective. For the second sentence, second example, combining sentence, last year we read Farewell to Ansonar. Last year we read, or I should say, they read. Let's go with Freak the Mighty. So 2A and 2B. So we're allowed to delete the extra sentences. And so you'll combine it once with a semicolon and once with comma fanboys. So as you're doing your three examples, you can do one of 2A, one of 2B, and one of just pattern 2. You could do 2 of 2, and one of 2A, or one of 2B. Since 2A and 2B are so similar, you don't have to do that. But I recommend doing at least one that's just pattern 2. So do those. Again, work with your breakout rooms or your groups if you have those available. And as always, feel free to submit your sentence pattern for each pattern as you complete it, rather than waiting to complete all three to turn them in to get feedback.